What's the frown for?
So, Jenna, if I did not study coaching with you, my view would be that as a manager, it's my responsibility to ensure that every person trains to the max for their role, that the way they do things, the way the game gets played is dictated by me, that I have to be there the whole time to shout from the guidelines and make sure that the ref doesn't choose against my team. That basically I was the center of the performance universe.
Yeah.
And I was spinning like 1,000 balls around myself, trying to maintain and make this thing perfect. Is that what you mean with coaching?
If I put this into like a sports field, for instance, if the coach was to get onto the sports field, whatever it is, and do all the roles and then, shout at each player in each position, that person would come out extremely burnt out very soon into the season. So when I talk about coaching, it's definitely not that idea of needing to have everyone do exactly as I say and as I do, and me having my fingers in all the pies all the time. That sounds extremely stressful. And I think a lot of people have felt that previously when managing. But when I talk about coaching, it talks about this idea that people don't come to the workplace thinking, oh, I can be useless today, and my manager will have to tell me what to do, and I'm going to love that. I think for the most part, people come to work going, I want to do the best I can in the best way I can. And if we treat people like that, I think generally they would do it. But I don't think that's the case in most situations and most corporates at the moment, because of the management style that we've had, because maybe we are expecting too much. I don't know why we've gotten to this point, but I definitely feel that the idea of management, and maybe it's my romantic idea that people would like in the workplace to contribute as much as possible. But from my experience, I've dealt a lot, like I said in my bio, I've dealt a lot with young people coming into the workplace, and they want to work. They want to do well. They want to succeed and move and improve. But if we're managing them like they're almost incapable of doing the job unless I tell them or I direct them or I manage them, micromanage them, then I don't think we're giving them an ability. And please don't get me wrong. If I sound like I'm saying that we must treat everybody like they're in bubble wrap and we must, say there's no consequences to the behavior, then you're misinterpreting what I'm saying, because there have to be consequences if bad behavior and if, performance isn't at the peak that we wanted or the place that we wanted to be there. That has to happen. But if we can know what the expectations are, communicate those expectations, and be there to help guide that person in getting to those the common expectations, yes, we can at least start the process of that person actually doing it for themselves without me having to feel like I have to, train or be there at every step. And if I have the trusting relationship in the psychological safe environment, and that person has any issues, then I'm there also to step in when necessary. But we're all sitting with that feeling that we can all capably do what we were contracted here to do, because there is an employee contract for a reason. You signed the contract, and therefore you have responsibilities to make sure it happens. So yes, coaching isn't necessarily about you getting on the field and you doing all the things. Coaching is about being there as someone who sees how the parts play together and how we can better our performance. And yes, upskill, yes, train, yes, have those conversations. You're always looking forward to the future, but you're not necessarily in those people's shoes doing their jobs on a day-to-day basis, which I think we get wrong so often.
We do, because we all approach things differently, don't we?
100%.
back to your individual, everyone's an individual comment earlier.
Yeah.
So, Jenna, if there was an example, I'm just trying to think of an example of how can we give a practical example of how this would work. So I'm an employee in your team. I'm fairly new and I have a project to deliver within a couple of days. Now, especially if I was younger, and by younger, I mean more junior in my work career, then I would have been fresh out of some form of academic training. I get put into this job, and for the first time in my life, I don't have someone telling me what to do unless I have a typical manager. So how would a coaching manager, a manager with a coaching approach, let me rather put it that way, how would you address that young individual and get them going on this project and explain the expectations to them?
Right. So I think transactional analysis comes into this quite clearly from the start. Because an individual who's coming into the workplace, they're excited, nervous, they are, like fueled up, there's a lot of energy, but the energy doesn't really have any place to go. So we want that energy, you want that like feeling of, let's do this, but you want to manage it, you want to kind of funnel it into the project itself. So that's where transactional analysis says to us, get into the nurturing parent or get into the free child even, and feel out their energy, bring the person into the project, explain what is happening, but not necessarily from this is the way that we do things here and this is how this must be done. It's about tapping into the type of emotion that they are. So if that is the anxiety, to say, I can see there's anxiety here and we can absolutely work together on this, but there are expectations that are coming up, big project, we need to get on to making sure that happens. So in that way, that's definitely identifying emotion would probably be the first place I start with that nurturing parent, to see that I have in front of me, they might look, Shane, they might not look like adults yet, but they might look like they're in the adult ego state because they're putting on that type of show, right? We always used to say the first day you walk in, you always look like, very proud to be there. And like day 465, you're like, oh, not this again. That's the first place I'd start.
Okay.
The second place is obviously to sit down with the individual, maybe with the team, get a sense of what the team is like, in making sure, hopefully, that you've hired the person that fits into the team environment, if it is a team environment at least. But not to overwhelm the individual, maybe just to inculcate that individual. And then past that, I'd probably sit down with the individual, ask them about themselves, not in a way to make them uncomfortable, but just to start them talking, start the process of talking, and then we can get into once I feel, and oftentimes you can actually sense the movement into adult. Maybe it's the shaky voice has started to calm down a bit. Maybe it's the things that they're saying are start to bring them into what they studied at school, and they're able to tell you a little bit about the projects that they've done in the past. So you start to edge the conversation towards them in the adult state. And then you start to talk about expectations at that point, the bigger picture, and then mapping out. I'm a very visual person, so I'm not sure everyone is as visual as I am. But I know we work together in that. I like to map things out. I like to bring it into like a very visual space to make sure that when I communicate, it's not just verbally. It's not just from and I think that's, and we sometimes talk and hope that the person goes like, sure, yeah, I got you. But we don't actually, the actual kind of, interpretation of that is quite different. And that maybe is something that you have to do as well. You have to test understanding. So once you've sat down with that individual, maybe send them to a team member who's very experienced. They then explain the situation from that perspective. Okay. Then they come back to you, the new person comes back to you, tells you what they've learned. And then, so you see there's like a back and forth, and it is a bit different when you're bringing someone in new, especially if they're a bit younger. But you're not, and maybe people would disagree with me, you're not mollycoddling them, you're not silver spooning them, but you're just giving them an opportunity to communicate as much as possible from the start. And then there's trust that's established as you go along. You're not, which I've experienced before, shoving them into the deep end, which is quite a fun exercise. But you can drown quite quickly, depending on your experience with swimming. So yeah, so it's also about asking those questions and not do you understand, but tell me about the process that you're going to be taking. Explain how you see the next 4 or 5 days, what you'll be doing in those days, maybe creating a to-do list, having them tick off that to-do list, emailing it to you or sitting down with you at the end of the day, and then bringing them into team meetings if that's going to happen as well. So that's probably the approach that I would take.
So what I really love about what I'm hearing there is, as a manager, I set the expectation very clearly. In fact, I have it reiterated if necessary. But I ask them, how will you do it?
Yeah.
And let them find their way.
Yeah, I think for young people, there's that feeling, I've heard it so many times. Almost every organization I go to, as when I was consulting at least, said, there's that feeling of when you feel entitled, and students come in and they feel entitled because they want to do things, but they don't have the power to do it. And if we can at least bring them into the process, even if it might actually be something good, you never know what you're going to learn along the way, but just bringing them into the process makes them feel part from the start of it. Yeah. So it's not necessarily, taking off the training wheels straight away, but it's saying decorate the bike, choose the path, but let's get to the same end point.
I love that. And then that probably becomes easier as you deal with people who are more and more senior, because there'll be a track record, there will hopefully be some form of trust. And so it's easier to say, this is what I need, tell me what you're going to do. Again, a very, very good approach, but even more easy to do because you don't have young people who you're still trying to understand the way they work and what creates flow for them.
Absolutely. And also you're bringing them into the way you think. So while you're having those conversations, you say, okay, that's a very interesting way of doing it. The way we sometimes do it here is X, Y, and Z. You're not saying to them, this is the way we do it, and therefore that's the way you do it. Which, again, I've been in environments that are like that. And I've learned a lot from them. But do I feel better now that I can do things in my own way? Absolutely. Some people need more guidance. Some people need those tools. And it is, and I love what coaching did for me, is that it taught me about like these tool belts, and that the tools in your tool belt, that you don't necessarily have those tools all the time that you're using, but when it comes that tool is there, it's in your ammunition, it's absolutely possible to use those tools. And even for young people, just like to have experiences to shadow for a little bit, but actually to do it. I think a lot of people just want to make their mark, but they just have to do it in a specific space, which is difficult. It's tough.
Yes. It's very interesting. I spoke to one of the other interviews that I did with a coffee companion, Mike Stopforth. Had such an interesting way of putting it. I don't know if you saw that one where he said, he tells his team, this is the table. You can't fall off the table. As long as you stay on the table, we're good. There are rules, there are parameters. Absolutely. But within that, bring whatever you can. And I thought that was a beautiful visual representation of exactly what you just said.
Absolutely. You can even draw the table.
Yeah. So I want to bring, I'm sorry, I know that we almost have time, but I just want to bring back one thing that we said in your intro, in your bio. You spoke about bringing back accountability. And you're right. I think so many people think young people today are entitled in the workforce and that they actually never get anything done. You know, they want to be important, but they actually never take responsibility and get stuff done. Does coaching help with this?
I think 100%. I think I've applied that in my time in academia, and some people have taken it on and succeeded, and some people have not and still succeeded. And again, I have to take into account that a coaching style or a leadership style doesn't always work for everyone. Some people would find my style quite annoying, I'm sure, which is fine. But coaching can bring a person to realize actually that they have these tools available to them already. They've learned it, or they can do it already. So coaching is about getting a person to realize that they actually have the answers within themselves. And if they can't do it necessarily right now, at least they can discuss it and see what kind of paths, how to set goals, how to do the step-by-step in order to get there, who the resources that you might need to access, what are the type of conversations that you would want to have and with whom. So all of these kinds of questions come up in coaching conversations. So I'm not telling you what to do. You're actually bringing it out for yourself. If I was to mentor you and I was to say, go to see that person, go to see that person, go to see that person, you'd still get something out of that conversation. There's no doubt. But through a coaching conversation, I'm rather asking you to map it out for yourself and to refine those goals into achievable goals, into things that are time bound, so you're almost very likely to do them as well. You're getting a person to think and creating these cognitive maps that are happening. And we talk about neurons firing together, so neurons that fire together wire together. And therefore, if a person is consistently thinking in this kind of way, that's the kind of critical thinking that will start to develop on its own. So whether I'm having that conversation with them or not, that person is starting to have the conversation in their own minds, which you then get to a point where the person doesn't even have to ask you as a manager. They're just having a conversation with themselves, which leads them to the accountability. So you create the trust that whatever they might need, you're available to them. But at the same time, they are within themselves trusting themselves, because they're already giving them the answers for their own particular issues or whatever the case is. So definitely, accountability, I feel, is one of the almost, I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but it is definitely one of the outcomes that I would expect from a young employee, for any employee.
Well, yes. So yes, but I think especially because we've seen so much bad press over the past decades about millennials, and we deny what they gave us when they started demanding purpose, when they started demanding, work-life balance. Well, I don't actually think that exists, but where they said, I have to have quality of life as well. And I think that millennials have had quite a positive impact. But people, as you said earlier on, very often consider them as, what do you call it? Entitled, not willing to take feedback. Yeah, not willing to take feedback. They don't want to take accountability. They just want everything to go their way. And so I think it's important to understand that maybe if we can take some of the shifts, there was an example once of someone that said that if you have, I think they were seeing a patient and the patient kept on complaining about her mother. And he said, that's entirely fine. I'm quite happy for you to blame your mother. He says, but what have you achieved in your life trying to counteract this? And she came out with this long list. And the person said to her, then you must thank her, because if she wasn't so difficult, actually you wouldn't have been here. So if the millennials have given us so much uphill and it's been so difficult to get used to them, then we must also thank them for their contribution and what they have gotten us to learn. So, yeah. So Jenna, thanks so much. I really loved our chat today. Thank you for bringing a whole fresh perspective. But I first want to ask you about that mug. How many liters of coffee goes into it?
Can I say a Joey amount?
What amount?
A Joey from Friends.
Oh, of course, Central Perk from a mug. Okay.
I must tell you, I don't put coffee into here. I only put tea. Because if I had to put coffee in here, I think I'd be up all night from like a woo kind of point of view. So right now, this is peppermint tea, which is very good for you. I recommend peppermint tea to anyone who has who just has the need to drink something delicious and lots of it.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you. But Jenna, thanks so much for visiting with us today at the Performance Cafe. I really appreciate that. And then is there an address, if anyone has a question, is there an address that they can find you at?
Sure, absolutely. So I prefer my personal Gmail, even though I am my business one day when it's all grown up will be a company called Potentiation, but it's not grown up yet.
Oh, lovely.
It's still infantile. But my Gmail, Jenna, jenna.seg@gmail.com. It's the best place to get a hold of me. If you have any questions about empathy, transactional analysis, any of the kind of coaching questions that you might have. And always happy to even just have the chat. Sometimes the chat really makes a difference. So thank you for the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Bye.
So everyone, another special visit with one of my friends. I'm really so very blessed to have all these people in my life. And thank you to Jenna for casting, I think, a lot of the issues that we have in business with dealing with emotion and having empathy and compassion in a new light using transactional analysis and coaching. I think it's a very good start, a very good place to start if you're thinking of changing your leadership style to be a little bit more COVID-proof. And thank you for your time yet again. It is lovely to see you. And if you're looking at this from YouTube, then please like and subscribe. And remember to click on the little bell for the notification so that you know when the next video is available. And if you are seeing this on LinkedIn or on Facebook, thanks for joining us there. Please like, subscribe, and share so that we can get these messages out to everyone that needs them. And I will see you again next week when we're back with a solo. Until then, have a great one.